They say that grief is the price we pay for love. But what if you paid the price, went bankrupt paying it, wept until your eyes were dry, and then found out that the thing you were grieving never actually died? What do you call that? It isn't grief anymore, it's a debt. And I am a woman who always collects what she is owed. My name is Clara, and for 2 years I was the Widow Thompson. I wore black. I visited a columbarium every Sunday to talk to a brass urn. I worked 3 jobs to pay off the medical debts my late husband, Greg, had left behind. I was the saint of our small town. People looked at me with that soft, watery pity, whispering, "She gave everything for him. She sold the house, she sold her car, she saved him, but she couldn't stop the cancer." If only they knew. If only I knew. The man in that urn wasn't Greg. It was probably wood ash from a fireplace in Mexico. And while I was eating instant noodles in a studio apartment, shivering because I couldn't afford heat, Greg was drinking a margarita on a beach in Cabo, spending my life savings on a woman 10 years younger than me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the hate that burns in me now, you have to understand the love that came before it. You have to understand how good of a liar Greg was. It started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were our date nights. We had been married for 12 years, and we were that couple, the ones who still held hands in the grocery store, the ones who finished each other's sentences. Greg was a landscape architect, handsome in a rugged, sun-weathered way with laugh lines around his eyes that I adored. I was a librarian, quiet and content with our simple, comfortable life. We didn't have children. We had tried, but it wasn't in the cards, so we poured all that love into each other. That Tuesday, Greg came home early. I was in the kitchen chopping basil for pasta. I heard the front door open, but I didn't hear his usual whistle. I didn't hear the heavy thud of his work boots being kicked off. "Greg?" I called out. "You're home early. Did you forget the wine?" He didn't answer. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the living room. Greg was sitting on the sofa, still in his coat. His face was the color of old paper. "Greg?" I felt a prickle of fear. "Honey, what's wrong? Was there an accident at the site?" He looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, swimming with tears. I had seen this man break his leg and not shed a tear. Seeing him cry terrified me more than anything. "Clara," he whispered, his voice cracked, "I went to the doctor today for that stomachache I've been having." I froze. He had been complaining of cramps for a few weeks, blaming it on bad takeout or stress. I had nagged him to get a checkup. "Okay," I said, sinking onto the coffee table in front of him, taking his cold hands in mine. "And what did they say? Is it an ulcer?" He shook his head slowly. He squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "It's not an ulcer, Elle," he said, using his pet name for me. "They found a mass in the pancreas." The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Pancreas. Even I, with no medical training, knew that was the bad one, the silent one. "A mass?" I stammered. But that could be benign, right? We can operate. We have insurance." "It's stage 4, Clara," he sobbed, finally breaking down. He pulled his hands away to cover his face. "It's aggressive. The doctor said. He said if I don't do anything, I have 3 months, maybe 4. My world didn't just stop, it shattered. It felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed me whole. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling his head to my chest. We sat there in the darkening living room, rocking back and forth, wailing together. I promised him then and there, through my own tears, that I wouldn't let him go. "We'll fight this," I whispered fiercely into his hair. "I don't care what the doctor said. We will get second opinions. We will go to specialists. You are not leaving me, Greg Thompson. Do you hear me?" He looked up at me, his eyes full of fear and gratitude. "It's going to be expensive, Clara. The treatments, the experimental stuff, insurance won't cover it." "I don't care about money," I said, and I meant it. "I care about you." That was the first domino, and looking back, I realized how perfectly he placed it. The next 6 months were a blur of misery. Greg stopped working immediately. He became a ghost in our house. He lost weight, or at least he started wearing baggier clothes and slouching, making himself look smaller. He shaved his head before the chemo even started, saying he wanted to take control. I took a leave of absence from the library, but soon realized we needed money desperately. Greg's specialist, a doctor in the city whom I never met because Greg insisted on going to appointments alone to spare me the pain, prescribed a regimen of drugs that cost thousands of dollars a month. "I can't ask you to pay for this," Greg would say, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of medical bills he had printed out. "Let me just die, Clara. It's too much. We're burning through our savings." "Shut up," I would snap, my heart breaking. "We have the 401k. We have the house equity. Money is replaceable. You are not." I cashed out my retirement fund, penalty fees and all. It was gone in 2 months. I sold my car and started taking the bus. That paid for another month of his specialized enzymatic injections. But he wasn't getting better. He was getting worse. He would spend days in bed moaning in pain, refusing to eat. I would bring him soup, bathe him with a sponge, and read to him. I watched the man I loved wither away, and I felt helpless. Then came the miracle. Greg came home from a solo appointment one afternoon with a brochure in his hand. He looked energized for the first time in months. "Clara," he said, breathless, "Dr. Aris found something, a clinical trial. It's in Mexico, a holistic oncology center in Tijuana. They have a new immunotherapy that's curing people with my exact condition." I grabbed the brochure. It looked professional, glossy photos of a seaside clinic, testimonials from survivors. "We have to go," I said. "When can we leave?" Greg's face fell. "We can't. The trial costs $150,000 up front. Insurance won't touch it because it's international." $150,000. We had nothing left. The savings were gone. The credit cards were maxed out. I looked around our living room. I looked at the house we had bought 10 years ago, the place where we had planned to grow old. "The house," I said. "No," Greg said firmly. "Not absolutely. That's your security, Clara. If this doesn't work, you need a place to live." "If this doesn't work, I don't want to live anywhere," I cried. "It's a house, Greg. It's wood and brick. If it can save you, it's worth it." He argued with me for days. He played the martyr so beautifully. He cried about how he was a burden, how he was destroying my future. Every time he refused, it only made me more determined to save him. Finally, he relented. We put the house on the market. We sold it below market value to a cash buyer for a quick close. We sold the furniture. We sold Greg's truck. We sold my grandmother's jewelry. When the check cleared, we had $165,000. I remember holding that check. I felt light. I felt triumphant. I thought I held my husband's life in my hands. "You're an angel," Greg told me the night before he left. We were staying in a cheap motel near the airport. "I don't deserve you." "I'm coming back to me," I said, kissing his forehead. "That's all the payment I need." Here is where the story gets tricky. The clinic had a strict policy, no family members during the initial 30-day isolation phase. They claimed it was to keep the environment sterile and focused on healing. "I'll go alone," Greg said bravely. "I'll fight this, and I'll come back to you a new man." I drove him to the airport. I watched him walk through security with a small duffel bag. He turned back once and waved. He looked frail in his oversized jacket. That was the last time I saw him alive. Or so I thought. The first 2 weeks were full of hope. Greg texted me every day. "Treatments are tough, but I feel a change. The doctors are optimistic. I miss you so much." I was living in a basement apartment I rented for $600 a month. I ate ramen, but I was happy because I thought he was getting better. Then the text stopped. For 3 days, silence. I called the clinic. A woman with a heavy accent answered. She told me Greg was in intensive restructuring and couldn't use his phone. On the 4th day, I got the call. It wasn't Greg. It was a man identifying himself as Dr. Eris. "Mrs. Thompson?" "Yes." I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm so sorry." His voice was somber. "We did everything we could, but the cancer, it caused a sudden embolism. Greg passed an hour ago." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just fell. I hit the floor of that basement apartment, and I didn't move for hours. The next week was a nightmare of logistics. The doctor told me that transporting a body internationally was extremely expensive and complicated due to quarantine laws. He suggested cremation at the facility. He said it was dignified and efficient. I was broke. I was broken. I agreed. The next week, a heavy cardboard box arrived in the mail. Inside was a brass urn and a death certificate in Spanish. I held that urn and I wept until I threw up. The human brain is a funny thing. It protects you from trauma by making things feel unreal. When I walked out of that diner, untying my apron, I felt like I was floating. I wasn't Clara, the waitress, anymore. I was a heat-seeking missile. I went back to my basement apartment. It smelled of mildew and unwashed laundry. I sat on my mattress and opened my laptop. I pulled up the photo again. I didn't just look at it, I dissected it. I saved the image. I opened it in a free editing software. I zoomed in until Greg's face was a collection of blurry pixels. But I didn't need 4K resolution to know my husband. I knew the slope of his shoulders. I knew the way his hair whirled at the crown. Hair that had supposedly fallen out from chemo 2 years ago. It was thick now, luscious, sun-bleached. I looked at the metadata of the photo. Mike had posted it yesterday. Location, the Azure Cove Resort, Cabo San Lucas. I looked at the woman next to him. She was tanned, fit, wearing a white linen dress. She looked expensive. She looked like everything I wasn't. And the child, the little boy, he looked about 2 years old. I did the math. If the boy was 2, that meant she was pregnant while Greg was dying in my living room. While I was wiping his brow and selling my jewelry to buy his medication, he was likely texting her. Rage is a cold thing. People think it's hot, like fire. But true, deep rage is like ice. It numbs you so you can do what needs to be done. I needed to get to Cabo, but I had $40 in my bank account. I looked around my apartment. There was nothing left to sell. I had already sold the TV, the jewelry, the furniture. Then my eyes landed on the shelf, on the brass urn. I walked over to it. I picked it up. It was heavy. For 2 years, I had treated this object with reverence. I had polished it. I had talked to it. I had kissed the cold metal before I went to sleep. I unscrewed the lid. Inside, there was a plastic bag of gray ash. I walked to the toilet. I poured the ash into the water. It swirled, gray and murky. I flushed. I watched the remains of my husband disappear with a gurgle. I didn't feel sad. I felt lighter. I took the empty brass urn to a pawn shop down the street. It was solid brass, high quality. $20, the guy behind the counter grunted, not even looking up. It's worth $50, I said, and I have a wedding ring. I didn't. I had sold my engagement ring 2 years ago, but I still had a plain gold band, a thin, cheap band I had bought for myself when Greg died to wear as a symbol of my widowhood. Let me see. I slid the ring off my finger. It left a pale tan line. $70 for both, he said. Deal. $70. That wasn't enough for a plane ticket, but it was enough for a down payment on a payday loan. I went to one of those storefronts with the neon signs. Quick cash, no questions. I had a pay stub from the diner. I had a clean, albeit empty, bank history. I took out a loan for $2,000. The interest rate was criminal, something like 400%. If I didn't pay it back in 2 weeks, they would come for me. But I didn't plan on being Clara Thompson in 2 weeks. I didn't know who I would be. I bought a one-way ticket to San Jose del Cabo. It cost $600. I bought a cheap burner phone. I bought a sun hat and a pair of large sunglasses. I packed a backpack, 2 shifts of clothes, a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a printed copy of the photo. The flight was surreal. I was surrounded by tourists in floral shirts, couples holding hands, honeymooners giggling about margaritas. I sat in the window seat, dressed in my black jeans and a gray t-shirt, looking like a shadow in a room full of light. When I landed in Cabo, the heat hit me like a physical blow. It was humid, sweet, and smelled of ocean salt and vehicle exhaust. I took a shuttle bus to the hotel zone. I didn't stay at the Azure Cove. I couldn't afford it. I stayed at a hostel 3 miles down the road, in a room with 6 bunk beds and a fan that rattled like a dying engine. I dropped my bag on the bunk. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired. My skin was pale from years of basement living. My eyes were dark. I looked like a ghost. Good, I thought. Ghosts are hard to spot. I put on the sun hat and the sunglasses. I walked out into the blinding Mexican sun. The Azure Cove was a fortress, high white walls, bougainvillea spilling over the gates, security guards in crisp uniforms. It was a place for the wealthy, a place for people who had successfully stolen $165,000 from their wives. I couldn't just walk in. I walked down to the public beach. In Mexico, the beaches are federal property. The resorts can't own the sand up to the high tide line. I took off my shoes and walked through the hot sand, dodging vendors selling silver and blankets. I walked until I saw the blue umbrellas of the Azure Cove. I found a spot near the edge of their property, just outside the rope line where the resort guests were lounging. I sat down on my towel. I pulled out a book, pretending to read. I watched. For 3 hours I watched. I saw fat tourists burning in the sun. I saw waiters carrying trays of neon-colored drinks. I saw children building sandcastles. But I didn't see him. The doubt started to creep in. What if he left? What if the photo was old? What if they were just visiting? My skin was burning. I hadn't eaten since the plane. Then I heard it. It was a laugh. A specific, booming baritone laugh that used to fill my kitchen on Sunday mornings. I lowered my sunglasses. About 50 yards away, walking out of the surf, was a man. He was dripping wet, shaking his hair out like a dog. He was wearing blue swim trunks. His chest was broad and tanned. His stomach was flat. There were no scars from surgery, no port scar from the chemo. He looked better than he had on our wedding day. He jogged up the beach toward a cabana. A woman was lying there, the blonde from the photo. She sat up as he approached. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a long, passionate, comfortable kiss, the kind you give someone you love. Then he picked up a towel and dried his face. He turned and scooped up a little boy who was digging in the sand nearby. He threw the boy into the air. The boy squealed, "Higher, Daddy, higher!" Daddy. The word ripped through me like a bullet. Greg had told me he was sterile. We had tried for years. He had cried when the doctor told him his count was too low. He had held me while I wept over negative pregnancy tests. Was that a lie too? Or was this child not his? It didn't matter. He was playing the role. I watched them for another hour. They were the picture-perfect family. They ordered lunch. They ate tacos. Greg wiped salsa off the woman's chin. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. I wanted to run up there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw his eyes out. But I didn't move. Because in that moment, watching him live the life he stole from me, I realized something. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would run. He would disappear again. He clearly had fake documents. You can't travel internationally as a dead man. If I wanted justice, I couldn't just scream at him. I had to destroy him. I needed to know where he lived. I needed to know his new name. I needed to know where he kept the money. So I waited.
As the sun began to set, turning the sky a bruised purple, they packed up. Greg carried the cooler, the woman carried the child. They didn't walk back into the hotel. They walked through the hotel grounds toward the parking lot. I scrambled up. I dusted my sand off my jeans. I wrapped my sarong around my waist to look like a tourist. I followed them. I kept my distance, staying behind groups of people. I watched them walk to the valet stand. Greg handed a ticket to the valet. A few minutes later, a car pulled up. It wasn't a rental. It was a white Jeep Wrangler. It had local plates. They live here, I realized. They aren't tourists. This is their home. As Greg walked around to the driver's side, I saw him tip the valet. He laughed and said something in Spanish. He looked so at ease. I needed the license plate number. I pulled out my burner phone. I pretended to take a selfie, angling the camera over my shoulder. Click. I got it. BZS 909, Baja California sewer plates. They drove off, disappearing into the traffic of the main boulevard. I stood there in the luxury resort driveway, shivering despite the heat. I had the license plate, I had the proof, but I was alone in a foreign country with limited Spanish and $1,200 left in my pocket. I needed help. I needed someone who knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. I walked back to the main road. I found an internet cafe. I logged onto a forum I used to browse when I was a librarian, a forum for amateur sleuths and private investigators. I posted a message. Need to trace a license plate in Cabo San Lucas. Willing to pay. Urgent. 10 minutes later, a DM. I can help, but it will cost you $200. Cash App. I sent the money. It was a
The Pedregal neighborhood in Cabo San Lucas is not just a place where rich people live. It is a fortress carved into the side of a mountain. To get in, you either drive a Mercedes through the main gate and wave at the armed guards, or you crawl up the backside of the cliff like a lizard. I was the lizard. It was 2 a.m. The moon was a thin, sharp sliver, offering just enough light to see the jagged rocks, but not enough to be seen. I had found a service trail used by the water trucks, but it ended halfway up. The rest was loose gravel and cactus. My hands were bleeding. I had sliced my palm on a piece of sharp shale. My legs burned, but the physical pain was a relief. It distracted me from the image of Greg throwing that little boy into the air. Daddy! Every time my foot slipped, I heard that word, Daddy. It pushed me upward. When I finally crested the ridge, the wind hit me hard, cool, salty, and wild. Below me, the Pacific Ocean crashed against the rocks, and in front of me, nestled into the stone tiers of the cliff, were the mansions. They glowed like spaceships, infinity pools lit in neon blue, fire pits flickering on terraces, walls of glass reflecting the stars. I checked the screenshot of the map on my burner phone. Calle de la Luz, 42. I counted the rooftops. 1, 2, 3 streets down. I moved through the shadows, keeping low against the retaining walls. I felt like a criminal. In a way, I was, but the man sleeping in that house was a murderer. He had murdered me. The Clara who believed in love, the Clara who trusted, she died in that basement apartment. The thing creeping through the bougainvillea was something else entirely. I found number 42. It was a modern white monstrosity. It had a gate, of course, but the side wall was covered in decorative trellis vines. I wasn't a ninja, but I was small, and adrenaline is a powerful drug. I pulled myself up, scraping my stomach against the stucco, and dropped silently into the garden. The smell hit me first. Jasmine and chlorine. I crept toward the back of the house. The entire rear wall was glass. The lights were off inside, mostly, but there was a soft, warm glow coming from the kitchen. I pressed myself against the cold glass door, peering inside. It was an open-concept living area, white leather sofas, a massive TV, art on the walls that looked like it cost more than my entire existence. And there he was. Liam, was standing at the kitchen island. He was wearing silk pajama pants and no shirt. He was drinking a glass of water. He looked haunted. In the daylight on the beach, he had looked perfect, but here in the dim light of the refrigerator, I saw the truth. He was pacing. He rubbed his face with his hands. He checked his phone. He looked out the window, staring right at me, though he couldn't see me in the dark, with eyes that looked paranoid. He's afraid, I realized. You don't steal a life without looking over your shoulder. Then a light turned on in the hallway. The woman walked in, the blonde. She was wearing a silk robe. She looked sleepy and soft. I held my breath. I watched them like a movie. She walked up to him and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. She rested her cheek on his bare back. "Liam?" Her voice reached me through the glass. It was muffled but audible. "Can't sleep?" Greg stiffened. Then he turned around and hugged her. "Just thinking about work, babe. Go back to bed." "You worry too much," she murmured, reaching up to stroke his face. "The deal is done. We're safe." "The deal?" My ears pricked up. "What deal?" "I know," Greg said. He kissed her forehead. I had a bad dream, that's all." "About her?" the woman asked. I froze. My blood turned to slush in my veins. Greg pulled away from her. He walked to the sink and poured the rest of his water down the drain. "Don't bring that up, Sophia, please." "It's been 2 years, Liam," Sophia said, her voice sharpening slightly. "She's gone. You said she was a mouse. You said she wouldn't even know how to find a passport office, let alone us." A mouse. Is that what he told her? That I was a mouse? A quiet little thing that would just curl up and die without him? "I know what I said," Greg snapped. Then he sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry. I feel like the past is close tonight. It's stupid." Sophia walked over to him and took his hands. "Look at this house. Look at our son. We won, Liam. You escaped. You're free." She kissed him. "Come to bed. You have the meeting with the investors tomorrow. You need to be sharp." She led him out of the kitchen. The lights went out. The house went dark. I stood in the garden trembling. It wasn't just him. She knew. Sophia wasn't an innocent victim. She knew about her. She knew about the escape. She knew I was a mouse. She was an accomplice, which meant I didn't have to feel bad about destroying her either. I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the security cameras mounted on the eaves. I looked at the lock on the sliding glass door. I couldn't break in yet. If I triggered an alarm, the police would come, and in Mexico, with money like theirs, the police would belong to them. I would be thrown in a jail cell and forgotten, or worse, driven out to the desert. I needed leverage. I needed access. I looked around the patio. On a teak table near the pool was a stack of mail. I glanced at the dark windows. Coast clear. I slipped my hand through the gap in the patio railing and reached for the table. My fingers brushed the paper. I pulled the stack toward me. I shuffled through it quickly by the light of the moon. A utility bill for Liam Walker, a flyer for a yacht club, and a large, thick envelope from a bank, Banco Santander. I took out my phone. I snapped photos of everything, the account numbers on the bill, the full name, the return addresses. Then I saw something else, an invitation. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored with gold lettering. "You are cordially invited to the Charity Gala for the Oceans, hosted by the Walker Foundation. Saturday, October 12th, 7 p.m., the Azure Cove Ballroom." October 12th, that was in 2 days. The Walker Foundation.
He had started a charity with my money? The irony was thick, I could taste it. I put the mail back exactly as I found it. I had a plan. Greg, no, Liam, was a narcissist. I knew that now. He loved being the hero. He loved being the center of attention. That's why he faked cancer, to get the pity, the love, the sacrifice. And now he was playing the philanthropist, the wealthy benefactor saving the oceans. He would be at that gala. He would be on stage. He would be surrounded by the elite of Cabo, feeling safe, feeling adored. That's where I would kill him. Not with a gun, not with a knife. I was going to kill Liam Walker in front of everyone he tried to impress. But I needed a dress, I needed an invitation, and I needed to know exactly what deal Sophia was talking about. I climbed back down the cliff. The descent was harder. I slipped twice, tearing my jeans, scraping my knee raw. By the time I hit the bottom of the service road, I was limping and covered in dust. I walked back to the hostel as the sun was coming up. The roosters were crowing in the favelas. I went into the communal bathroom. I stripped off my dirty clothes. I stood under the cold trickle of the shower and washed the blood off my hands. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. "You are not a mouse," I whispered to my reflection. I dried off, I dressed in my clean clothes, I sat on my bunk and counted my money. $1,100 left. A ticket to the gala was probably $500. A gown would be another $300. Hair, makeup, shoes. I would be broke. But I had one asset I hadn't used yet: knowledge. I opened my laptop. I searched for the Walker Foundation. The website was slick. There was a photo of Liam and Sophia smiling benevolently. The About Us section said, "Founded by Liam Walker, a visionary entrepreneur who made his fortune in tech before retiring to dedicate his life to marine conservation." Tech? Greg couldn't even set up the Wi-Fi router. He had built a house of lies, and houses of lies have a fatal flaw. If you pull out one brick, the whole thing collapses. I needed to find the brick. I spent the next 6 hours in that internet cafe. I dug. I used every skill I had learned as a librarian, which is basically just a professional researcher. I searched Liam Walker in business databases. Nothing before 2 years ago. I searched the image of his face using a...
Saturday arrived with a humidity that made the air feel like a warm, wet blanket. In the hostel bathroom, under the flickering fluorescent light, I prepared for war. I didn't have a glam squad. I had a drugstore lipstick in a shade called Venom, a curling iron I had borrowed from a German backpacker in the bunk below me, and the emerald green dress I had bought secondhand. When I zipped it up, I looked at myself in the mirror. The Clara who wore oversized cardigans and orthopedic shoes for shelving books was gone. The woman staring back had hollowed cheeks, yes, but they made her look severe, elegant. My hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, fell in loose, dark waves over my shoulders. I put on the gold heels. They pinched my toes. Good, I thought. Let the pain keep you sharp. I took a taxi to the Azure Cove. I didn't want to walk and arrive sweating. I spent my last few pesos on the fare. I had exactly $0 left. If this went wrong, I wasn't just going to jail. I was going to starve. But looking at the lights of the resort looming ahead, I didn't care about hunger. I felt full of hate. The ballroom entrance was a spectacle. A red carpet was rolled out over the marble. Photographers were snapping pictures of tanned men in white tuxedos and women dripping in diamonds. I walked up the carpet. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I forced my face into a mask of bored indifference. I had watched enough rich people at the library fundraisers to know the key to wealth is looking like you'd rather be somewhere else. I reached the check-in desk. A young woman with a clipboard smiled at me. "Ticket, please?" I held up my phone. The forged QR code was on the screen. My hand didn't shake. She scanned it. Beep. The little light on her scanner turned red. My stomach dropped. It didn't work. I'm caught. "Oh, hold on," the girl said, tapping her machine. "The Wi-Fi out here is spotty. Let me try again." She scanned it again. Beep. Green. "Welcome, Miss Smith." She read the fake name I had embedded. "Enjoy the evening." I walked past her, my knees weak. I stepped through the double doors and into the lion's den. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. The tables were draped in navy blue silk. A live jazz band was playing smooth, unobtrusive music. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. And there, in the center of the room, holding court like a king, was Liam Walker. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo. He looked taller than I remembered, probably the lift in his shoes. He was laughing, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a scotch. Sophia was next to him, wearing a silver gown that looked like liquid mercury. She was touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, playing the perfect wife. I took a glass of champagne from a passing tray. I drank half of it in one gulp. Liquid courage. I moved to the periphery of the room, standing in the shadows of a large pillar. I watched him. I watched him shake hands with donors. I watched him clap a man on the back. I watched him kiss an older woman on the cheek. He was charming. He was magnetic. He was also the man who had sat in my kitchen crying fake tears, telling me he was scared to die while I signed over the deed to my house. The discrepancy between the two men, the pathetic, dying husband and this vibrant, wealthy socialite, made my head spin. I didn't have a seat, so I stood near the bar at the back, leaning against the wall. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of the Walker Foundation, a man who has dedicated his second act to saving our seas, Mr. Liam Walker." Applause thundered. Greg jogged up the stairs to the stage. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the crowd with a humble, aw-shucks smile. "Thank you," he said. His voice, that deep, warm voice, it sent a shiver of revulsion down my spine. "You know, a few years ago, I faced a crisis, a health scare, that made me reevaluate everything." My grip on the champagne glass tightened. He's using the fake cancer story. "I realized," he continued, looking solemn, "that life is short, and we spend so much time chasing money, chasing status. But when you're staring into the abyss, none of that matters. All that matters is what you leave behind." He paused for effect. A woman at a front table dabbed her eyes. "That's why I came here to Cabo, to heal. And in the ocean, I found my cure. Now I want to give back." He smiled, brightening the mood. "So tonight, I'm asking you to open your hearts and your wallets to help us protect this paradise." The crowd cheered. I felt bile rising in my throat. Open your wallets? Just like he asked me to open mine? He stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause. The lights came up. Dinner was served. This was my window. Greg, Liam, didn't sit down immediately. He walked toward the bar, likely to get a refill before facing the donors again. He was alone, just for a moment. Sophia was busy talking to the mayor's wife. I pushed off the wall. I walked toward the bar. I timed it perfectly. Just as he ordered Macallan 18 neat, I slid into the space next to him. I didn't look at him. I looked at the bartender. "I'll have what he's having," I said casually. "He owes me." Greg froze. He didn't turn his head. He just stopped. His hand, reaching for his wallet, hovered in midair.
He knew my voice. 12 years of marriage, thousands of conversations. You don't forget the voice of the woman who sang you to sleep when you were dying. The bartender poured 2 drinks. He set them down. "That'll be $40, the bartender said. "Put it on his tab," I said casually. "He owes me." Slowly, agonizingly, Greg turned his head. He looked at the green dress, he looked at the hair, he looked at the makeup. Then he looked into my eyes. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might actually faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes bulged. He looked like he was seeing a demon. "Hello, Greg," I whispered. He gripped the edge of the bar. His knuckles turned white. "Clara?" he choked out. It was barely a sound. "It's Liam now, isn't it?" I took a sip of the scotch. It burned. "Nice suit. Fits better than the hospital gown." How are you here?" He looked around wildly, checking if anyone was watching. "You're supposed to be destitute," I finished for him. "Broke? Crying over an urn of fireplace ash?" He flinched. "Lower your voice," he hissed, leaning in close. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood and expensive citrus, made me want to vomit. "Clara, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice was calm, deadly. "You faked terminal cancer, you stole $165,000 from me, you left me with $40,000 in debt, and you came here to play house with your mistress." "It wasn't like that," he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I was sick. I was mentally sick. I needed out. I couldn't hurt you by telling you the truth." I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "So you decided the kinder option was to let me watch you die slowly? To let me sell my grandmother's ring? To let me live in a basement?" "I left you the life insurance," he whispered frantically. "You didn't die, Greg. There was no body. The insurance company wouldn't pay out without a death certificate from a U.S. consulate, which you didn't provide because you were busy buying a Jeep." He looked trapped. He looked at the exit. "Don't even think about it," I said. "If you run, I scream. I scream so loud that every donor in this room will know exactly who Liam Walker is." He froze. He knew I had him. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice hardened. The charm was gone. The predator was back. "Money? Is that it? You want a cut?" "I want my life back," I said. My voice was calm, deadly. "But since you spent it," I gestured around the room, "I'll settle for yours." "Clara, listen to me," he said, his eyes darting to Sophia, who was glancing over at us from the table. "I can pay you back. I have money now, real money. I can wire you $200,000 tonight. Just walk away, please." $200,000? I swirled the scotch in my glass. "You think that's what this is worth? You think you can buy me off like you bought that fake doctor?" $500,000, he pleaded.
I have read hundreds of thrillers. In the books, the heroine always knows exactly where to go. She hotwires a car, she knows kung fu, she looks glamorous while running for her life. Real life is not a book. Real life is running barefoot down a service alley that smells of rotting fish and garbage, stepping on a bottle cap that slices your heel, and realizing that you have no idea where the U.S. consulate actually is. I burst out of the rear exit of the Azure Cove, gasping for air. The humidity wrapped around me like a chokehold. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, muting the sound of the gala, the jazz, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. I was alone in the dark loading zone. "Run," Sophia had said. I didn't need telling twice. I shoved my feet back into the torturous gold heels because the asphalt was littered with broken glass. I ran toward the streetlights of the main boulevard. My phone, the burner, buzzed in my clutch. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I pulled it out as I reached the sidewalk, ducking behind a parked delivery truck. It was a text from an unknown number. I know you didn't take the money. If you don't come back to the ballroom in 5 minutes, I call the police and tell them you assaulted my wife. You'll rot in a Mexican prison, Clara. Don't test me. Liam. He was bluffing. He wouldn't call the police, not with the cartel ledger on a USB drive currently burning a hole in my hand. He was trying to flush me out. I typed back 2 words. Checkmate, Greg. I threw the phone into a storm drain. If he was tracking it, let him track the sewer. I needed a taxi, but I had no cash. Sophia hadn't given me money. She had given me a death sentence disguised as a flash drive. I looked up and down the boulevard. It was Saturday night in Cabo. Traffic was gridlocked. Taxis were full. Then I saw it. A black SUV with tinted windows pulling slowly out of the resort's valet exit. It wasn't a guest car. It moved with purpose. It was prowling. I froze. The SUV slowed down as it passed the delivery truck I was hiding behind. The window rolled down an inch. I saw a man's eyes scanning the sidewalk. Greg's security, or worse, the partners Sophia was terrified of. I pressed myself into the dirty metal of the truck, holding my breath. My heart was beating so loud I was sure they could hear it. The SUV idled for a terrifying 10 seconds. Then it accelerated, moving down the street. They were headed toward the marina. They assumed I would go the tourist area. I had to go the other way. I kicked off the heels again. I couldn't run in them. I carried them in one hand, the USB drive clenched in the other. I started jogging north, away from the water toward the city center where the government buildings were. I ran for 20 minutes. My lungs burned. My emerald dress was soaked with sweat, sticking to my skin. I must have looked insane, a woman in a ball gown running barefoot through the dusty streets of Cabo San Lucas. People stared. A group of men on a corner whistled. I kept my head down and kept moving. I finally found a hotel, not a luxury one, but a chain hotel, a City Express. It had a lit lobby. I stumbled through the automatic doors. The air conditioning hit me, drying the sweat instantly and making me shiver. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Senora, are you okay?" "I need to use a phone," I gasped, leaning on the counter. "Please, it's an emergency." She hesitated, looking at my dirty feet, my wild hair. "Please," I whispered, "I've been robbed." It was the truth, in a way. She slid a landline phone across the counter. I dialed the number for the U.S. Consulate General in Tijuana, the emergency line for American citizens abroad. I had memorized it during my research back at the hostel. It rang and rang. U.S. Consulate Emergency Services. This line is for life or death emergencies involving U.S. citizens only. My name is Clara Thompson. I am in Cabo San Lucas. I have evidence of a money laundering operation involving an American citizen and the Sinaloa cartel. I am being pursued. I have a flash drive. There was a pause. The tone on the other end shifted instantly from bureaucratic boredom to sharp alert. "Ma'am, are you safe right now?" "I'm in a hotel lobby, City Express on the main highway." "Do not leave. I am patching you through to Agent Miller. He is the DEA liaison in the region. Hold on." Miller. Sophia was right. A series of clicks, then a gruff voice. "This is Miller. Who is this?" "My name is Clara. I have a ledger from Liam Walker. Sophia Walker gave it to me." Silence. Heavy, stunned silence. "You have Walker's ledger?" Miller asked, disbelief in his voice. "We've been trying to crack his shell companies for a year." "I have it, but his security is looking for me. They're in a black SUV. I can't stay here." "Okay, listen to me closely, Clara. The local police in Cabo, we can't trust all of them. Do not flag down a patrol car. Do you understand?" "I understand," I whimpered. "I have a team near the marina, but they are 20 minutes out. You need to stay invisible until we get there. If you stay in that lobby, you're a sitting duck." "Where do I go?" "Is there a pharmacy nearby or a supermarket, somewhere with crowds and multiple exits?" I looked out the window. Across the street was a large Traderi supermarket. It was open late. There's a supermarket across the street. Go there, go inside, stay in the aisles, keep moving, don't let anyone corner you. We're coming. Look for a gray van with California plates. The code word is Lazarus. Lazarus. The irony almost made me laugh. Okay. I hung up. Thank you, I told the receptionist. I ran back out into the night. I crossed the 4-lane highway, dodging honking cars. I made it to the supermarket parking lot. I walked into the store. The bright fluorescent lights were blinding. I grabbed a shopping cart to look normal. I pushed it down the cereal aisle. My bare feet slapped against the cold tile floor. I pretended to look at a box of cornflakes. My reflection in the glass of the freezer door showed a woman on the edge of a breakdown. My mascara was smeared. My dress was torn at the hem. I checked my watch. 5 minutes gone, 15 to go. I moved to the produce section. Then I saw him. Not Greg, the man from the SUV, the one whose eyes I had seen. He was walking through the automatic doors of the supermarket. He was wearing a suit, but no tie. He had an earpiece. He stopped at the entrance, scanning the store. He must have tracked me, or maybe the hotel receptionist called someone, or maybe they just knew the only lit buildings on this strip. He saw me. I was standing by the apples in a bright green dress. I was impossible to miss. He tapped his earpiece and started walking toward me fast. His hand went inside his jacket. I didn't wait to see the gun. I shoved the shopping cart toward him, a feeble barrier, and I ran. "Hey!" he shouted. "Stop!" I sprinted toward the back of the store, past the bakery, past the butcher counter. "Excuse me, permiso," I yelled, shoving confused shoppers out of the way. I saw the double doors marked only personnel, solo personnel. I hit them with my shoulder. I burst into the warehouse area. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling. A forklift driver yelled at me in Spanish. "Salida?" I screamed. "Exit?" He pointed to a loading dock door at the far end. I ran. I heard the double doors bang open behind me. The footsteps were heavy, fast. He was gaining me. I reached the loading dock door. It was locked. I slammed my body against the panic bar. It gave way with a screech of rusted metal. I fell out onto the concrete loading dock. It was a 4-foot drop to the pavement below. I jumped. I landed badly. My ankle twisted. Pain shot up my leg like lightning. I cried out, scrambling to my feet. I limped toward the alleyway behind the store. I heard the man jump down behind me. "Clara," he shouted, "don't be stupid. Give me the drive and you live." I didn't stop. I turned the corner into the alley. It was a dead end, a brick wall and a dumpster. Trapped. I spun around, pressing my back against the dumpster. I clutched the USB drive so hard it cut into my palm. The man walked around the corner. He wasn't running anymore. He was smiling. He pulled a gun from his jacket. It had a silencer. "End of the road, Senora. Hand it over." "If you kill me," I said, my voice shaking but loud, "the email sends automatically. I set a timer." It was a lie, a desperate movie script lie. He hesitated. "Bullshit." "Try me," I said. "Greg knows I'm smart. He knows I plan ahead. Why do you think I came here?" He took a step closer. "I think you're a desperate housewife who got in over her head." He raised the gun. I closed my eyes. I thought of my kitchen. I thought of the urn. I thought of the $165,000. At least I made him sweat, I thought. Then tires screeched. Bright headlights flooded the alley, blinding both of us. A gray van roared around the corner, jumping the curb. It slammed to a halt between me and the gunman. The side door slid open. "Lazarus!" a voice shouted. "Get in!" The gunman fired. Foot! A bullet pinged off the metal of the van door, inches from my head. I didn't think about the pain in my ankle. I didn't think about anything. I dove into the open door of the van. A strong hand grabbed my dress and hauled me inside. "Go, go, go!" The driver floored it. The van peeled out of the alley, tires smoking. I lay on the floor of the van, panting, staring up at the roof. A man in a tactical vest looked down at me. He had a badge on. The flight back to the United States was on a military transport plane. I sat strapped into a canvas seat, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring at the rivets on the fuselage. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of the gun in the alley. I saw Greg's face at the bar, the terror of a man who realized his ghost had come back to haunt him. When we landed in San Diego, I was debriefed for 3 days. I sat in a windowless room with Agent Miller and a team of lawyers. I told them everything. I gave them the photos of the mail. I signed affidavits. They offered me witness protection. They said the cartel might hold a grudge. I declined. I'm done hiding, I told Miller. I hid in a basement for 2 years grieving a man who didn't exist. If they come for me, they come, but I'm going to live my life in the sunlight. Miller respected that, but he did give me a piece of advice. Move, change your state, and maybe buy a big dog. I took his advice. The fallout was swift and brutal. Because I had delivered the ledger, the Rosetta Stone of the money laundering operation, the feds moved fast. They froze the accounts within 12 hours. 2 days later, the Mexican authorities raided the mansion on Calle de la Luz. I watched it on the news from a hotel room in Arizona. The footage showed the white gates being rammed. It showed agents carrying out boxes of documents. And it showed him. Greg, or Liam, or whatever he wanted to be called, was led out in handcuffs. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. He looked small. He looked old. When he saw the cameras, he didn't smile. He hung his head. I learned later that he had surrendered immediately. He begged the DEA to extradite him to the U.S. He knew that if he stayed in a Mexican prison, the people he stole from would get to him within a week. He chose a concrete cell in America over a shallow grave in the desert. Sophia was arrested too, but her cooperation and the drive she gave me earned her a deal. She and the boy were placed into protection. I don't know where they are, and I don't want to know. I hope she found a job. I hope she raises that boy to tell the truth. As for Greg, he pleaded guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't send a victim impact statement. I figured the silence was louder. 6 months later, I was living in a rental house in Oregon. It was raining, a clean, cold rain that washed away the memory of the Cabo humidity. I was working in a bookstore, just part-time to keep busy. I was happy. I was healing. Then the letter came. It wasn't a handwritten apology from prison. It was a government envelope, Department of Justice. I opened it with trembling hands, sitting on my porch. Inside was a check, Asset Forfeiture Fund Reward Program, paid to the order of Clara Thompson. Amount $850,000. I stared at the number. $850,000. It wasn't just a reward, it was a refund. It was the $165,000 he stole from the house sale. It was the $40,000 in credit card debt. It was the cost of the car I sold. It was the interest on my grief. And there was plenty left over. I cried. Not the heaving, ugly sobs of the widow I used to be, just quiet tears of relief. I took that check to the bank. I paid off every cent of debt. I bought a small house with a garden, in my own name, paid in cash. I bought a new car. And I bought a dog, a German shepherd named Justice. I visited the library recently, not to work, just to smell the books. I walked down the aisle where I used to shelve novels while worrying about how to pay for Greg's chemo. I ran my fingers over the spines. I thought about the woman I was back then, the Clara who believed that love meant setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I wish I could go back and hug her. I wish I could tell her, he isn't dying, honey, he's just lying. But if I hadn't gone through the fire, I wouldn't be forged in steel today.
Greg sits in a cell 6 feet by 8 feet. He has no view, he has no millions, he has no legacy. I have a garden, I have a dog, I have a bank account that is mine and mine alone. And every Tuesday night, our old date night, I pour myself a glass of wine, sit on my porch, and toast to the empty urn I flushed down the toilet. He tried to bury me. He forgot I was a seed. They say that money can't buy happiness, and maybe that's true. Money didn't fix my broken heart, and it didn't erase the 2 years of my life I lost to grief. But money can buy freedom, and sometimes it can buy a little bit of justice, too. Greg thought I was weak. He thought I was a mouse. He thought he could use me up and throw me away like a wrapper. But he learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the woman who held your hand while she thought you were dying. Because if she loves hard enough to save you, she hates hard enough to destroy you. So here's my question to you, my dear listeners. When I was at that bar in Cabo, Greg offered me $500,000 cash to walk away and keep his secret. Be honest with me in the comments. Would you have taken the money, disappeared, and let him live his lie? Or would you have done what I did, risked your life to burn his empire to the ground, not knowing if you'd get a dime? Is justice worth more than a guaranteed payout? Tell me your story. I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your eyes open, check your bank accounts, and remember, the truth always surfaces eventually, usually when you least expect it. This is Clara's story. Thank you for listening to Voices of Auntie May. Don't forget to like and subscribe.